Hey there, guys. Welcome back. I just wanted to talk a little bit about something interesting here. I just got into. I think we set it. It was set up before. It was set up before the hockey season, but it's a couple weeks in now, and I'd never done it before. I had never done fantasy sports before, so I wanted to talk a little bit about fantasy sports. And I've got some friends who do fantasy football, which I've thought about trying, but I never actually have. Like I said, I've never played fantasy sports before. Well, a guy that I think we follow each other on Instagram, and I think he's a subscriber here on the channel. We were messaging back and forth, and he was talking about he runs a fantasy hockey league through ESPN, and he had asked, if I would ever be interested in ever trying to play fantasy hockey. And I had said, I've never played fantasy sports. I might be a little bit behind the times in a way, but I had never played fantasy sports before. So he was kind of telling me a little bit about how it works, how the draft works, and stuff like that. And there wasn't any money, that I didn't have to put any money in. I think it's just mainly like a fun kind of league. But I was like, screw it, why not? Let's give it a shot. So I downloaded the little ESPN fantasy sports app or whatever, because you got to do it through ESPN, through the ESPN site. So I downloaded the ESPN fantasy app, and we kind of did the little setup there. I put the figured out what my team name would be, and which was interesting because I'm like, what kind of team name could I go for, but I figured I just something just kind of popped into my head and I came up with it, so I put my team name there. And so I kind of set that up, and we just waited for whenever the draft would be. And if anybody out there, if you guys play fantasy sports, whether it's fantasy hockey, excuse me, fantasy hockey, fantasy football, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know just how many of you guys play fantasy sports. It's definitely interesting. It we had the draft. The way the draft worked, because it's the league that I'm in. It's a 10-team league. It's 10 people. There's two divisions of 5 teams in each. And I picked 5th. I was the 5th pick in the draft. So and it was a snake draft, which means basically, the first round you'll draft 1 through 10, but then round 2 it'll go 10 back down to 1. So every other round, so at the end of round 1 and the start of round 2, team number 10 picks twice, back to back. And then at the end of round 2 and the start of round 3, the team with the number 1 pick then picks back to back, and so on and so forth throughout the all the rounds. Well, it happened. The draft happened on a night where, unfortunately, I had to. I was working. It was on a Thursday night, and I was out working. So fortunately, they were, it was able to be auto drafted, which oddly enough, a friend of mine who does fantasy football, I guess that's how he always has his set to auto draft. And I was thinking too, am I gonna get stuck with all the scrubs? Am I gonna get stuck with all these players who don't hardly play and this, that, and the other? Well, when the whole thing was done, I went and I looked up at all the players I had picked, or that had been picked for me technically, and I looked at it and I was like, this isn't bad. I was kind of impressed. I mean, my two goaltenders. The first one, what ended up being my first pick, number 5. How nobody picked him, I don't know. But my goalie that was picked at number 5 was the reigning Conn Smythe winner, Andrei Vasilevsky. And I'm like, all right, I like that. And later on, my other goalie was Jack Campbell for Toronto. And I'm like, all right, two pretty decent goaltenders. And I went and I looked at the rest of my roster. Now, mind you, I've dropped a couple guys, picked up a couple guys, so my roster's kind of changed a little bit. But I had Jamie Benn. I got Jamie Benn. I got Logan Couture. I got one of the Foligno brothers for Minnesota. I think that's that might be Marcus. I think that's Marcus Foligno. I got him. I had a couple other guys from the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's interesting. My team has 4 guys from the Tampa Bay Lightning, 3 from our hometown Minnesota Wild, and it was definitely a little interesting, and I've got I got a guy from Ottawa, a guy from Columbus, I got a pretty decent, relatively decent squad. Now, granted, I'm 2 weeks in, and I'm needless to say, I'm 0-2. I'm 0-2 so far, but it's interesting, and I kind of learned the first week as I was still trying to figure out how everything got set up and how you can edit, how to edit your team, edit, who's on the bench, who's on IR, and all that. And I didn't realize until there was one against the very first guy I was playing against that, it might help if you go in and kind of edit your lines and take a couple guys off the bench, because I had two guys. I had 2 guys that were on the bench that I totally spaced. I didn't go in and look at anything, and I ended up with 2 guys on the bench. It was Mika Zibanejad, and I think Jamie Benn was the other one. And the other guys weren't playing. I think I had 2 or 3 other guys that were on the bench. They weren't playing, but I didn't put them in, and I could have. And yeah, I kind of those 2 guys alone, I think Zibanejad had gotten, I think, 16 points, and I think Jamie Benn had gotten like 13 on the bench. I looked at that and I'm like, really? Like, seriously? I'm like, I gotta look at this more often. So needless to say, I went and, I know now to go in and look at them all, and see who's playing, who's on the bench, try to figure out, who's out, who's Uh, I dropped one guy. I went and dropped one guy. He was, he'd been struggling. I dropped him. Another one of the teams picks him up on waivers. Of course, what happens right when he gets picked up on waivers? Yeah, I go and I look at his thing. Yeah, he got 23 points. He ended up with a hat trick and like 3 or 4 assists, and I think one of them was like a power play goal, or it just. I looked at that and I'm like, of course that has to happen. But it took me a little bit to kind of get in there and figure out who's playing where, who's playing on which night. I know the last week that I played, my week 2 opponent, I had a pretty good lead on him. And then, what was it? I had like a 60-point, I think I had a 60-point lead on him. But then this one day came, and my entire roster, I only had 2 guys that were going that night. He had 15. And I'm like, well, here's where he catches up. Oh, he not only caught up. I went from the start of the night being about 60 points ahead to at the end of the night, I was 40 points down. And this was right at the end, toward the end of the week. There was like 1 day left, so I was screwed. I was just totally screwed. So, I mean, that happens. But, it's definitely, it's an interesting little experience. It's a little, interesting experience. I was showing, one of my friends tonight kind of how it worked, because he was showing me how his fantasy football thing worked, which is a little easier. The roster is smaller, and you only have to adjust the roster like maybe once a week, as long as you maybe check it, see who's playing, who's not, who's hurt, and adjust your bench and all that. As long as you have that done by a certain time, you're good. The hockey one, you gotta check every day. You gotta check it every day. You gotta look who's playing, who's not, and you kind of got to keep up with it. And it's interesting. He looked at it and he's like, yeah, no. He's like, that's a little too complicated. And I looked at him and I'm like, well, dude, if I can figure it out, come on. If I can figure it out after never playing fantasy sports before, So I mean, next football season, I might talk to him a little bit, and I might try to put together a team for fantasy football. But doing the fantasy hockey league for a couple times, it's been fun. It really it's been fun, and it's interesting. And if anybody, if any of you guys know or are familiar with his screen name is Fantasy Hockey Hacks, that's the league that I'm in, and it's really cool. It's the league is named the FHHL. And there's 2 divisions of 5 teams, so it's a 10-team league, and it's fun. It's a pretty cool little thing to do. But for anybody who's never really gotten into fantasy sports, if you get into fantasy hockey, just be aware. You've got to you kind of got to look at your roster every day. At least. I mean, you can even adjust your roster for the next day's game, like while the other games are going for that particular night. You can just scroll ahead until to the next day. Look who's playing. Look who's playing. If you got anybody on the bench who's playing, you can adjust them, move them into to, wherever you'd want on the list. You could move them, you can move them wherever. And I think there's, what is there? There's 10, it's either 10 or 11 forwards, 6 defensemen, I think 3 utility players and 2 goaltenders, I think. I'm off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure, but your roster is 22 guys. You have to have a 22-man roster, and and you can go, the utility players also can be forwards, they can be defensemen. It seems like the utility players doesn't really matter. It could be a forward or a defenseman. But it's interesting. It is a very interesting kind of thing. And if you guys have never played fantasy sports before, look into it. It's a pretty good time. It actually is really. I've kind of gotten the hang of it now, so it's pretty cool. It really is a pretty cool deal. And needless to say, the guy that I'm going up against, we're both 0-2, so somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to get off the schneid, so to speak. So and obviously hoping it'll be me. But we've and it goes throughout the entire week. So each week it starts on a Monday night and it goes all the way through the entire week until Sunday night. That's when the matchups go. It goes all your guys throughout an entire week from Monday to Sunday. And whoever's got the most points, obviously at the end of the week wins. So but yeah, it's a pretty good time. And let me know in the comments section if you guys have ever played fantasy sports before. If you haven't, don't be afraid to get into it. It's kind of cool. It's definitely not a bad time. And it takes a little bit of getting used to. You got to download the right app, the ESPN Fantasy app on your phone. And whoever's, you can talk to whoever. You can even create your own league if you wanted to. And you could create your own league, and get a bunch of your friends in it, and do your own league yourself. You set up the draft and everything, and all that. And you can either pick the players yourself, or if you're doing something on the day of the draft, you can set it to auto draft and it'll auto draft it for you. So it's pretty cool, pretty good time. So again, let me know in the comments section if you guys have ever played fantasy sports, or fantasy hockey, and let me hear you guys' feedback on that. If you guys have ever played fantasy hockey, football, whatever, and how do you guys like it? Do you guys like it? Do you like it? Love it? Hate it? I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on that. And if there's if there's anyone new that's just cruising through, happens to come across this video or any one of my other videos on my channel, tune into them. Hopefully you like them. If you do, hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you here. I'm nearing 170 subscribers right now, which is, that's awesome. I can't thank you guys enough for that. And the more people that subscribe, the more reach the channel gets, and hopefully it continues to grow with your guys' help. And I love and appreciate every one of you. And because the Enforcer, Stevie Bradley, he just got to 1,000 subscribers this past weekend, which was awesome. Another really great guy with an awesome channel. So if you're gonna subscribe to hockey channels, I mean, obviously subscribe to mine. It'd be awesome if you're new. But check out his channel too. His channel is awesome. You know, check out the Jersey King. He's got a pretty good channel. The Jersey Zone. That's Landon, I think his name is, from the Jersey Zone. He's got pretty good. He's got really good content. BW Hockey. His channel is awesome. Oh God, there's so many of them. Knucklehead Hockey, Jinja Ninja, BA Sports. I mean, there's a ton of different, you know, channels out there of hockey content, jersey content. You know, I mean, you know, that's part of our passion is the jerseys. You know, we love that stuff. And but yeah, you know, if you guys have played fantasy sports, you know, I'd love to hear you guys' feedback, whether you like it, love it, hate it. And if you're just cruising on through and you just happen to come across the channel, hopefully you guys you know, tune into the videos, like the videos, subscribe to them. I would love it. Considering what is it? I saw 73% of the people who view my channel have not subscribed. I'd love it if I could get that number down a little bit. You know, get those people to subscribe. It'd be awesome. But yeah, you know, I mean, it's you know, fantasy sports is definitely an interesting thing, and you know, I'm glad for all of you who you know, who could make it all the way to the end of the video, and yeah, I appreciate every one of you more than words could ever express. And again, you know, I mean, if you're new, I'd love it if, you know, hopefully you like the videos, hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you here. I thank you guys for your support, and I will talk to you guys again very soon.